readers. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper, or extending a new welcome to those of you who are new subscribers or are new to my channel today at this particular juncture. I did want to reach out and let you know something. Someone asked me, I think it was Molly, asked me recently if liking videos was important for us in some way. And all this time, I'd really never thought about it. And I said, it's really up to you. But I did discover recently from watching some new booktubers that liking the channel does move the channel into an algorithm that features it to more people. So if you would like to subscribe to the channel, feel free to do that. And if you would like to hit the like button for this video or any other videos, feel free to do that too. But always, no pressure. This is a fun venture for me, and I want it to be a fun and meaningful venture to you as well. So today's topic is books about mothers. Now, motherhood can be a very beautiful experience for a lot of people, and it can be challenging for probably just as many people, if not more. It's also a challenging topic for children who are motherless at this time of the season, and it can be challenging for children who were not treated well by their mothers and perhaps were victims of trauma, abuse, neglect, and a host of other things. So I do want to be sensitive to that, and that this video may not be for you. And if that's the case, you feel free to go to the list and choose another one or wait for the next one to drop. But today I did have a couple of books, two that I have, well, four that I have read, but one that I don't remember much of anything about. So it's obviously time for a reread, and one that I haven't read, but it's been on my nonfiction shelf for a while. So four are fiction and one is nonfiction. So let's start with that one, The Outlier, shall we? This one is called Returning to My Mother's House by Gail Straub. I have had this for a really long time. It came out, I think, while I was still working in the child abuse arena. Let's see, when did you release? 2008. So yeah, it definitely is that old. Now, Gail Straub is a very popular nonfiction writer and does take on pretty sensitive topics and a lot of human development and just introspection and those kinds of topics that are useful to people to find meaning and purpose, which of course we're all looking to do. But this one was written years after her mother died prematurely. And so she was really looking at the struggles that people face when their mother dies. Any parent dies, but especially their mother. So I'm going to read a little bit about this so that you can hear it from the flap words rather than my own, because I think this is said very beautifully. Many years after the premature death of her mother, she undertook a period of soul searching and came to believe that, like her mother and so many women of our time, she had overcorrected in the direction of the masculine, her successful life of outer accomplishment and committed social activism, having come at the expense of a rich and satisfying inner life. Her search took her around the globe to Africa, Bali, Russia, China, and Ireland, where she encountered this longing to retrieve sacred female wisdom among women everywhere. Finding her way back to her innate female wisdom restored a sense of balance between external and internal activism and contemplation and public and private, and gave her a sense of equanimity that had eluded her for decades. Equanimity? Equanimity? You know, I don't have to say that very often. Correct me if I'm wrong. Gail's poetic and heartfelt story is for anyone who has ever struggled to build and sustain an interior life in our driven and fast-paced society, and for mothers and daughters everywhere. This is such a peaceful cover too, and I just really love it. Just at that time, it was an important piece of work, and I never picked it up. So I don't know if this is something that interests you, but I do think that it isn't a bad idea for me to revisit that now. Here come the fiction titles that are related to and about mothers. Now, some of you who've been with me for a while, and not even that long of a while, have heard about my feelings about some of these, but some of you are new, and maybe some of you heard about my feelings about some of these and then didn't pick them up yet, or you just want to celebrate them or reread them because it is kind of that time. This was one that I really was surprised that I loved. There was a big hype around this, and I was just not certain. The premise of it just didn't feel like it was going to delight me in the way that it did. So Lessons in Chemistry was by Bonnie Garmis. This was a rollout bestseller for sure when it came out, I think in 2023. Is that right? Let me check. It hasn't been out that long, actually. This was published in Britain in 2022, so I think it came out in the US in 2023, or maybe at the end of 2022. But I got this British copy of this book because I really liked it better than the one that was displayed here in every bookseller's store, everywhere you went. It is overhyped, but I do think that it is an interesting read. So this follows chemist Elizabeth Zott, who is a female in a male-dominated world for sure. This is set back in the 60s, maybe even the late 50s, but it does give you a great sense of what was present at that time and what was available to women at that time and what was made unavailable to women of that time, especially women who stepped out boldly in the direction of what they wanted or were then realizing that circumstances in their lives had shifted in ways that created a large amount of grief and emptiness. And how could this particular character, Elizabeth Zott, fill that grief and emptiness, stand up for the things that she believed in, and care for herself and other people that she deeply loved? Yes, there is an aspect of this that is motherhood. It starts out in the beginning that you are aware that she has a child. You're just not aware of how that happened and what the story behind this is. And then, of course, it begins to unfold for you. And I just really loved the pace of this book. I loved the writing. I loved the character development, not only just of Elizabeth, but of all of the folks that were in her circle of influence, and just how difficult it must have been for women in the 60s. I mean, I have a sense of that, I guess, because I was born in 61, but how challenging it was for them to really stand up for themselves and reach out for what they wanted. And it's still hard sometimes today. Let's not be mistaken about that, right? Let's not forget that this is a really challenging time still for women in many ways. And then I've talked about this before. This was also a 5-star read for me, The Many Daughters of Aong Moy by Jamie Ford. The fact that a man wrote this book about this many women characters is quite astonishing. Really, I mean, he did an amazing job. This was my first read by Jamie Ford, and it will not be my last. I had put off The Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet for a long time because I just wasn't sure I was going to like it. But now, after having read this, I'm certain that I will. This follows The Many Daughters of Aong Moy in very different timelines. So from her timeline all the way up into the future timeline with a mother whose name I don't want to get messed up. It is Dorothy. Yes. Dorothy is a poet laureate, and she has been experiencing some challenges in her career as well as in her marriage. And she's noticing that her daughter has memories of some things that she couldn't have memory of. And so she takes her to a practitioner to find out what happened. And this leads you on this journey to how generations of women and the experiences that they have can be transferred and can be influential in the lives of their daughters and their daughters and their daughters. It is quite beautiful and brilliant. I loved reading it physically more than the audio just because it was sometimes hard for me to keep track of where we were and who we were with. You do need to really be clear about which daughter you are with and which capacity and which chapter. Other than that, though, it is brilliant in my eyes, just brilliant. This one I talked a little bit about because it was an anticipated read for me last year, and I did read it not long after I acquired it. But this is Cutting Teeth by Chandler Baker. Now, this is billed as horror, and I will say that for those of you who are really sensitive to those kinds of things, this could be difficult for you in that sense. But I would say that outside of the horror genre, this is absolutely more a book about women and their children. And that really, really surprised me. So the premise of this is creepy. It is about a number of preschool children who are discovered to be seeking out injuries to their peers so that they can suck their blood or drink their blood. And so the teacher is obviously very disturbed by this, and some other parents are called, and things happen. And so what this will remind you of is a sort of a neighborhood or a group of women story that you've probably read before. And the aspects of that story contain confidence. I would say they contain a lot of fear and worry about whether or not they're being good parents, pressure to be everything and all things to parents, especially peer pressure with other mom groups and those kinds of things. Making sure that your child is safe, setting good boundaries, but also noticing when there are things that have to be addressed, but also a lot of these mothers remembering their own parents, their own relationship to their mother, their own experiences. And so it is absolutely more than what it is billed for. And I really wish that they would have done a better job of kind of setting this up. It says part murder mystery, part motherhood manifesto. It explores the standards society holds mothers to, along with the ones to which they hold themselves and the things no one tells you about becoming a parent. So I would say that that was the last bit of the blurb, but I think it's part of the blurb that a lot of people ignore and maybe don't pick up because they think it's merely about horror. And it's so much more. And I really, really enjoyed this. It will never leave my thoughts, I don't think. But then let's talk about one that did leave my thoughts. And I think I probably need to read it again. A lot of you have mentioned this as one of your favorites by this author, and that's The Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. I know you're shocked by this, but I will say that I read this during a time where I was preoccupied by a lot of things, including work. And I mean, we're all still preoccupied, but the level to which I was preoccupied at that time was huge. So this was published in 2010, and I think I was just absolutely swamped. I do love this cover. I really, really do. And this was a reading group club book, so I think it had a book club piece at the end, but I never did anything with that either. So it's definitely time for me to take another look at this. Let me make sure I get their names straight because there's a lot of them. So Meredith and Nina are the daughters. One of them is raising her children and managing the family business. The other one is traveling the world and just kind of enjoying life and being very free and open about that life's enjoyment. Meanwhile, their father is very, very ill and he's dying. And he is married to their mother, Anya, I think her name is. Yes, Anya. And he, on his deathbed, asks Anya to tell them a fairy tale story that only she can tell. And he makes her promise that she will tell them the story. And Anya is very difficult. She's very quiet. She's very, what's the word I would want to use? What's the word that they use? Icy. Yes, icy and enigmatic. I would say that's very, very well worded. Anya does agree to tell them the story, and it takes them to Leningrad. It takes them to difficult times. It takes them all over to places they would not have imagined. The question is this story a fairy tale, or is it partly their mother's experience? And will this help them to understand their mother more? I don't remember enjoying this a lot, and I can't help but wonder if it was because of where I was in 2010, which was in a very emotionally challenging time, both with some deaths in our families as well as moving, kids into different places in their lives. And I think we were moving at around that time physically. And I was also trying to work and a new job and do different things. And yeah, it was quite something. So I feel like it's time for me to revisit this and to give it another shot because, again, a lot of people loved this much more than they loved the chick lit that Kristen Hanna produced as well. There is another book, actually, there's two books, I think, by Kristen Hanna that are in the chick lit genre. And one of them I read, it was called Firefly Lane. Years ago, I read this and I did enjoy that. I was planning on reading Fly Away, which is the second one in that series. It's a duology, but I didn't get to it. But I do remember in Firefly Lane, the character Tully had a terrible relationship with her mother, and that was just a really awful situation that she was in. And the other girl, who I think was named Kate, but don't quote me on that, had a sort of a normal family, if there is any such thing. And they became very, very good friends. And they kind of weathered years and years and years of friendship and support and all those kinds of things. So there were some motherhood themes in Firefly Lane as well. And then, like I said, there probably were in Fly Away too, but I didn't ever get to that. It's not that I didn't want to necessarily, I just didn't. So that might be something for me to think about one of these days. But nevertheless, if I were going to prioritize something about mothers, it would be rereading this and then maybe rereading Firefly Lane and then maybe getting to Fly Away. So there's a number of books you could choose from if you want to read books about mothers. And some of them are, again, more difficult. Some of them will bring up, difficult memories for a lot of people. So I want you to be really, careful. And if this topic is not for you, then absolutely by no means should you read these books, but it just got me thinking, as I do every year around Mother's Day, about some of the books that I have really loved and appreciated that are set around motherhood and daughterhood or sonhood. Although it seems as though the trend is more about books about mothers and daughters, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me today. Thanks so much for your support. I'm finally getting to some comments, so thanks for being patient with me there too. Enjoy your Mother's Day if you are a mom or if you are celebrating your mom. Take good care of yourself on this holiday if you are not in a position to want to focus on Mother's Day and all that that may entail for you. And as always, happy reading. Bye.